Do you have any mementos? He kept a diary.
Yeah, I kept a diary.
He was going to write a book.
Yeah, I'm going to write a book. But I'm waiting for some people to die. Well, I'm not feeling good if that means anything.
U.S. number 31 calling McMurdo. Come in, over. U.S. number 31 calling McMurdo. Urgent. Come in, over.
Welcome back to our part 4 video of The Thing. If you haven't seen part 3, check it out first. And let's continue, because we got a lot to go over. The summer box office of 1982 was mammoth, and it started out with Arnold Schwarzenegger making a name for himself as Conan the Barbarian. For the kids, Annie was singing up a storm, while Rocky returned to face Clubber Lang in Rocky III. On June 4th, 1982, two more huge movies came out. The first being Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and the other was the creepy and Spielbergian horror film Poltergeist, which we will cover someday on this channel. But the real creature of the summer came out on June 11th, and that was E.T. E.T. destroyed everything pretty much for the rest of the year, and went on to become the highest grossing film of all time. Michelle Pfeiffer found her first starring role in Grease 2, but coming out the same week as E.T. was definitely not a good thing, and in the end, the sequel made minimal impact at the box office. On June 18th, Clint Eastwood tried to steal The Firefox, but in the end it didn't steal any thunder away from E.T. Al Pacino tried to be a family man in Author, but once again it was no big competition for all the other big films slugging it out at the box office. On June 25th, Megaforce tried to save the world, but no one in the world noticed because they were at the movies checking out E.T. During that same week, Blade Runner was released. Blade Runner was completely rejected by audiences and critics, which was ironic because the same thing would happen to The Thing. And The Thing arrived at theaters the same day Blade Runner did. There was a special screening for The Thing at the Hollywood Pacific Theater, with Elvira hosting the events. Awards were given out to those in monster costumes. It was more about the costumes and less about the movie, but at least it was something. Meanwhile, E.T. just sucked all attention away from The Thing, and it made little. After its Friday and Saturday opening, things did not look good. By Sunday morning, after its premiere, Universal Vice President Helena Hacker reported that the film didn't open well, and that it would lose 50% of its theaters during the second week. Stuart Cohen would go to visit John at his house to report this, and stated that the director was stricken, like he had been punched in the gut. During that second week of release on July 2nd, 1982, The Wonderful Secret of NIMH came out. The following week, Tron would arrive, and this was The Thing's last week in cinemas, basically. In the end, The Thing would only make $20 million domestically. The movie was simply crushed by other films at the time, and audiences who saw the film and liked it had little ability to spread good word of mouth, because by the time they said anything good, the film had already left theaters, and the critics simply brutalized the film.
And the movie just basically is an excuse for this very gruesome and repellent creature to gross us out. It is the most nauseating thing I've ever seen on a movie screen, I think.
The critical reaction to The Thing was just torture for the makers of the film. Some of the wonderful reviews left were, "The Thing is bereft. despairing and nihilistic, lacking in feeling, meaning the characters' deaths did not matter. The Thing is entertaining only if the viewer needed to see spider-legged heads and dog autopsies. A foolish, depressing, overproduced movie, aspiring to be the quintessential moron movie of the 1980s. What's most shocking is that the sci-fi horror community even turned on The Thing. And the ridiculous thing is, this reviewer noted that the film has bad continuity, which it does not at all. Regardless of this is what Starlog magazine said. It has no pace, sloppy continuity, bland characters. It's my contention that John Carpenter was never meant to direct science fiction horror movies. My only reaction to this is, here are some things he'd be better suited to direct: traffic accidents, train wrecks, and public floggings. Carpenter was bashed left and right, and the film was called gore porn of a sort, and it hit Carpenter pretty hard. I take every failure hard. The one I took the hardest was The Thing. My career would have been different if that had been a big hit. The movie was hated, even by science fiction fans. They thought I had betrayed some kind of trust, and the piling on was insane. Even the original movie's director, Christian Nyby, was dissing me. And what did the questionable director of the Howard Hawks' 1951 The Thing from Another World say about the man who loved his film and honored it in Halloween? If you want blood, go to the slaughterhouse. All in all, it's a terrific commercial for J&B Scotch. Carpenter tried to weather the storm and focused on moving forward with Stephen King's Firestarter, but Universal made things worse when they terminated John from the project as a reaction to The Thing's fallout. Even Stuart Cohen had a film in the works with another studio that involved John Carpenter called Only Angels Have Wings, but that was canned too. In short, John was currently labeled a pariah in Hollywood, but John wouldn't have to wait long because a producer named Richard Kobritz, who owned the rights to Christine, wanted him to direct the film from the start of conception, regardless of the backlash, because he worked with him on the 1978 television film Someone's Watching Me. Carpenter would take the job more out of necessity than desire. It just wasn't very frightening, but it was something I needed to do at the time for my career. Regardless, John would bounce back, and thank God, because we have a lot more of his films to cover that were just wonderful in the future. A big thing about the early 80s was that after Halloween in 1978, there were tons of slasher films coming out on a regular basis, and there was a lot of disdain, especially in critical circles, for that genre.
This movie is about the 7th direct ripoff of Halloween.
Another mad slasher going after mostly women victims, this time in a coal mining town. I'm really getting sick of these pictures.
I think The Thing suffered partly because of that disdain. On top of that was the extreme reality of The Thing. It was hopeless and didn't apologize one bit for depicting it. The early 80s was about having pride in your country. The biggest songs during June were Eye of the Tiger about winning, Ebony and Ivory about understanding, and families were cheering about the wonder of E.T. The time wasn't ready for The Thing or Blade Runner. It was just too optimistic of a period in our history where our stars were muscle-bound and practically every woman on screen was a model. In The Thing, some of the men looked like they didn't shower for days, which was a reality for folks working in such Arctic outposts. It was gritty and it was grim. It was, in my opinion, the opposite of its time, and general audiences and critics just were not ready for it. Yet there were a lot of us, like myself, that simply loved this film in the early and mid-80s, and I think it's time we start talking about the movie itself. If you ever watched one of my videos before, like The Hitcher or Basic Instinct, you will know, as a viewer, I would never tell you how to watch a movie. Your view is paramount, and I kind of feel it's ridiculous to note this in any video, but the truth is we live in a culture where a large portion of the population gets emotional or offended when folks have a differing view with them. In the end, I say watch the movie and believe whatever. This channel doesn't have to affect your viewing experience unless you choose for it to affect your viewing experience. I am not an arbiter of movie thought. Therefore, there's no need to leave nasty comments if you are so passionate about this movie that I must agree with your view. With that said, we are going to point out some minor things that have been made into debated theories, and we are going to address the ones that have been debunked by the filmmakers themselves and are just not logical, right, wrong, or indifferent. So take it as you will. The first theory we are going to ignore at this channel is the spark of life in the eye theory. A lot of theorists out there state that whenever you see a character without a gleam in their eye, they are a thing. And this is simply not the case, as there is only one sequence in the film where the gleam in the eye mattered, and that was the blood test. Dean Cundey stated he specifically did the gleam in the eye for that scene only, and it was he that consciously made the effort to light the blood scene himself. When filming the end of the movie, and other scenes in the film, the spark of light was not paid attention to, especially during the last scene. Theorists are dead set that because Keith David has no light in his eye, he was a thing at the end, and it is simply conjecture on the theorist's part, because this is Dean Cundey's take.
When we did the ending with Keith and Curtis, the last two, there was no real effort because John had said, no, we don't know. The ending is left ambiguous. But, so it was a case of, doing one thing, and now it's sort of grown into a lot of people hoping that they could figure it out.
Another theory that specifically targets the end of the film is that Childs must be a thing, because you can't see his breath, and since the thing doesn't need lungs, it doesn't breathe like Russell, and therefore he's a thing. This is just a stupid theory, and I am in great disagreement with it, because look at this thing, which had less time to change compared to Childs if he was one. Oh boy, it has a breath. I wonder why. How about this? Oh boy, I thought things didn't have organs like humans. Why is it being affected by a human heart condition? Well, this is obvious, in that the thing replicates humans perfectly, including our frailties and biology. And it maintains that form until it's ready to change. To add insult to injury, in later home media releases, Childs does in fact have breath in the cold if you look closely. Then there's the theory that this film is a direct correlation to the AIDS epidemic. Unfortunately, history does not match this at all, and it's really retroactive gobbledygook. Firstly, the film was based very closely to the novella, made in the 1940s, and there was no such thing as AIDS in the 1940s. Following the book was the core motivation for the creation of the film, and it can't be ignored. The movie's mood and approach is very similar to the novella as well. It is not trying to send some message about a disease that wasn't even defined by the World Health Organization until 1986, some 4 years after the movie released. And to push this point, the first case of AIDS was clinically reported on June 5th, 1981, after the script was finished. The word AIDS was not even introduced until a meeting with the CDC in July 1982, weeks after the movie released. In September 1982, the CDC officially announced the name of the new virus as AIDS. The Thing was already out of theaters by this time. It is simply revisionist history, and many of the actors of the film stated that AIDS was never a thought in their minds when making the movie. Some audiences who insist believing in this theory retroactively can believe it if they want, but it does not line up with the facts. With those quick things covered, let's begin the film itself. Now, a lot of folks debate who is piloting the alien spacecraft, and the truth is, we just don't know. And you have to believe what you want to. If you believe the 2011 Thing movie as canon, the creature did know how to pilot the craft. The problem is, if you see the 2011 film as canon, there's really a bad plot problem there. If the ship did crash, why didn't the Thing just restart it and fly away? Because according to that film, the ship is fine, because the creature returns to it after destroying the Norwegian base. It starts it up with no problem and is about to fly away when it dies. It's easy to say the Thing brought parts to the ship and write the script for the storytellers, but at the same time, the Thing didn't have much time to put in those parts as someone was chasing right behind them. An odd moment for the film is that this dog has been shot in the hind leg, and it is being chased, and unlike a normal dog, it stops and desperately tries to get the attention of this man while still in the fight or flight mode. This is easily overlooked by most audiences, but at the same time, it denotes the devious and manipulative nature of the Thing. And we will cover why this dog is so incessantly licking him in just a little bit. Peter Malone was terrified of dogs, as he had an incident with a really bad dog. Nevertheless, he saw this scene through. Now, the Norwegian ranting for everyone to get away from the dog was named Jans Bolin in the original script, the novel, and deleted footage. Now, if I was the Norwegian, I would have parked that helicopter between the base and the dog. That way, I could have a clear line of fire as it comes towards the base. But that's not what happened. Instead, they circle around, get behind the dog, and then land as the dog enters the base. When Jans is on the ground, trying to communicate with the members of Outpost 31, he spoils the whole movie, if you knew Norwegian. And this is the translation for what he says in the film. Get the hell away. That's not a dog. It's some sort of thing. It's imitating a dog. It isn't real. Get away, you idiots. Now, the script states that the men of Outpost 31 were commissioned by the United States National Science Foundation to gather data concerning the physical and natural sciences of the continent of Antarctica. Rather than wait till later in the film, let's take a look at the crew of Outpost 31 per actor's insights and the script insights. Station Chief M.T. Gary was played by Donald Moffat. He was an ex-Army officer who runs the base. He has no patience for nonsense, and when things are normal, he is an adequate leader. Geologist Vance Norris, played by Charles Hallahan, is suggested to be close friends to Gary, and that's why he offers him the leadership. But there is no verification that he was the bona fide second-in-command. However, Norris is not a leader at all. He's a follower, as throughout the film you will notice him never taking the lead. Not only does he pass the top spot, he follows other people's assumptions, like he did when everyone was trying to kill MacReady. He followed the rest of the group without any resistance or say. Of course, you could say he was a thing and trying to kill the human Russell, but we'll get to that later. According to Kurt Russell and John Carpenter per the DVD commentary, R.J. MacReady was in the Vietnam War.
Didn't we talk about the Vietnam helicopter idea?
Yeah, that he had some experience and was probably an alcoholic now. And what was interesting about it was that here was this guy who was up in Antarctica with all these other guys who had their own problems for wanting to be up there, but this guy had to get a little further away than most. So.
Another source states that after he left Vietnam, he got a job at Hughes Aircraft. as a test pilot, but he got in trouble with some management and ended up at Outpost 31. MacReady is an all-or-nothing man. Death or success, there is no between. He will choose death to stop the thing in a heartbeat. A nice foreshadow of this is how he plays chess. When he loses, he destroys the chess computer. When it comes down to the thing, when he's gonna lose, he destroys the base. The parallels can't be missed. He makes the decisions which mirrors Carpenter's view on many things, such as this quote, "Directing is about deciding. When you direct, decide." MacReady perfectly encapsulates John's attitude. Mechanic and backup pilot Palmer was played by David Clennon. According to John Carpenter, Palmer suffers substance abuse issues and he's been in and out of rehab. He is now at Outpost 31 trying to rebuild his life. When clean, he's a great mechanic, but he's a fairly inexperienced pilot compared to MacReady. Palmer is a conspiracy theorist and close friends with Childs, who is his roommate and fellow mechanic. As for Childs, like MacReady, you learn a lot about him in the movie. He's played by Keith David, and the only thing that's not really in the movie is that Childs grew up in Detroit, and he despises Clark. Speaking of Clark, he was depicted by Richard Masur, and he is the dog handler of the base. It's well known that Clark loves the dogs and the isolation of Outpost 31. He relates more to his dogs than he does the people there, and we tried to locate all of the dog names, but the names we could discover were Nanook, Archangel, Lobo, and Buck, per the novel. He is quiet and serious, the opposite of Childs, and therefore they don't get along. Chief Biologist Blair is overworked and edgy and played by Wilford Brimley perfectly. His assistant is Biologist Fuchs, played by Joel Polis. Fuchs is sensitive, intelligent, and he's very trusting of Copper and MacReady, and he is just as bright as Blair. The physician of the base is Dr. Copper, played by Richard Dysart. The only things I could find on him was that he's professional, a decent man, and a good doctor. George Bennings, who is a meteorologist, played by Peter Malone, also doesn't have a lot about him, except that he's an old pro and close friends with Gary. T.K. Carter plays the cook Knowles. Honestly, Knowles is the most likable character of the group, as he is fun and free-spirited. As things turn sour, he becomes the most sympathetic and nervous of the group, thus being most of the audience's point of view. For those scared during the movie theater experience, Windows, played by Thomas G. Waits, was a good avatar for those people. Windows is the radio operator, and according to Thomas Waits, Windows wanted to be in Hollywood, but his life didn't turn out the way he wanted, and now he hates it, and he hates where he ended up, Outpost 31. He has little enthusiasm for his job, and therefore doesn't do a great one. Unlike Knowles, Windows is portrayed as panicky and sometimes cowardly. So now that we've gone over the crew, let's take a look at the new arrival at the base. The Thing dog was played by Jed, and Jed was part Malamute and wolf, and Richard Masur loved working with this dog. Unlike most dogs, the wolf side of Jed was prevalent, and that meant when startled, the wolf would stare or go quiet. It didn't growl or show agitation, and when the dog would get that look, everyone had to be mindful and careful on the set, because when the dog was in that state, you had to move slower or it could become dangerous. However, this never happened on the set because trainer Clint Rowe kept everyone and the dog in check. The only people the dog wouldn't work around was Charles Hallahan and Kurt Russell. Charles was so nervous around the dog that it would throw off the dog's performance. As far as Kurt Russell, the dog did not relax around him. The dog would not go near Russell or look at him in any way, except with caution. It was assumed it was because Russell worked around animals like horses and had that scent on him, but in the end, the dog simply couldn't stand being around Russell, and therefore they never shared a scene together. After the dog goes nuts licking Bennings, you can see Clark sewing up its gunshot wound in the next scene. And now it's time to discuss one of the biggest elements of this movie, and that involves the dog licking Bennings desperately during the beginning. The film establishes the fact that the thing does not only assimilate you violently, but it can infect you virally, which is why later Fuchs says this.
If a small particle of this thing is enough to take over an entire organism, then everyone should prepare their own meals, and I suggest we only eat out of cans.
This conversation occurred on the 4th day of the movie, and we'll walk you through that timeline in our last video. Suffice it to say, we want to lay out the true horror of the situation the crew at Outpost 31 is in. And the next time you watch this movie, keep what I'm about to lay out in mind. And to start us off, let's see what the first person infected had to say about when the dog was licking him.
And then he starts bumping my face like this, bang, 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 bang. And who knows? I'm not supposed to know, nobody's supposed to know that he is infected, the dog's infecting me with the virus.
In Who Goes There, the team deduced that the creature was also like a disease, and there was a lot of discussion about it, and this movie copied that book loyally, so it makes complete sense that the dog thing thinks it's about to die, and desperately it spreads some of its saliva all over Bennings in a last-ditch effort to survive. You can see it is licking him so much that he has to push it away and try to block it. This stands to reason that if the thing drank from a bottle you were swigging, you would be infected too. But the question is, how long does it take for an infection to take hold and morph a person? We're going to go through the movie step by step, looking at the germ chain that we see and who could be infected by the thing by germs alone. We're not saying they're infected, but what we are showing you is just how dangerous the situation is for them. Once again, if you believe Blair's notes that Fuchs discusses with Russell, then it's a pretty concrete case to how hopelessly screwed this team is, without the creature even revealing itself to them. So first up, the dog got saliva all over Bennings, and then Russell gives Bennings his J&B, and look at the gloved hand he grabs it with. It's the same one the dog was licking profusely. He then drinks from said bottle, and it's easily debatable that he's infected at that point, even if the dog's licks missed his mouth, which it didn't, according to the actor. A lot of folks say MacReady becomes the thing because it was his bottle, but we never see Bennings give him that bottle back. We do see MacReady drinking with the J&B bottle later, but one thing this place has plenty of is alcohol at the bar. And look, boxes of the stuff right here. There are most likely cases of J&B for MacReady to replace the bottle he gave Bennings. So we can't assume that it's the same bottle he's drinking out of, like some of those theorists insist is the case. Then the dog goes into a room with a shadow, and we will cover this one in a bit, as right now we are only focused on germs. We have to do this one theory at a time, so we lay the groundwork. The person in the shadow is either Palmer or Norris, and it's important to keep that in mind, and we'll go into that later. Now I want you to notice that the biologists and doctors have gloves on as they examine the bodies, so they are following somewhat sterile procedures. But I want you to notice Fuchs, who is examining some ripped up clothing. He's doing it with his bare hands. Hopefully dude washes his hands, because if there are thing cells on that from an attack, well, you know where I'm going with this. At the end of the first night, we know that Palmer or Norris is a thing at this point. And if you notice, Palmer is smoking a doobie and Childs puts his hand out to have it passed to him. If Palmer is a thing at this moment, and Childs takes a puff of this doobie, there's a good chance he's infected as well. The thing I never understood is, if Palmer is a thing already, would it not just assimilate Childs during the night? Well, we'll get to that later. Now remember, this dog has been walking around the base for some time, and only at night it goes in the kennel. If I was a thing, and I was intelligent just like the humans and maybe more, I would lick everything someone would touch. when they are not looking to spread my germs. It's a chilling thing to think about. Many fans think Blair got infected when he taps the body of the thing and put his pencil to his mouth afterward. However, if you freeze the scene frame by frame, you can see he gets close to it, but he doesn't put the pencil against it. The guy's a biologist. He would know better. And even if he did touch the creature with the pencil, which he didn't, look at where he rests the pencil. It's not on his lips. It's just under his lips. He wasn't turned here. And we will specifically focus on Blair's turn later. On day 2, Knowles handles some dirty clothes with his bare hands. And then Russell handles them with his bare hands. Think about that for just a second. If you were a thing, wouldn't you want germ-infested clothes in a place where people got stuff they ingested? Now, Knowles is cooking food for everyone, so if he didn't wash his hands, that would infect everyone for sure. But take a look at this scene. Russell's bare hands are inspecting these dirty clothes as well. Then he grabs his bottle with the same hand. It doesn't go on the tip, but there is a fine line that he could have been infected by being so unsanitary. It can be debated. After Blair is sent to the shack, MacReady sips a bottle of alcohol and then puts it to Blair. Once again, if MacReady was polluted in any way up to this point, then Blair would be infected the moment he sips from it as well. However, I'll tell you right now, before Blair goes in the shack, he's already a thing. Don't get mad, no nasty comments just yet. Wait for me to explain it in my next video. Then you can razz me all you want. I'll kill you. Finally, we get to Fuchs' moment, where he tells MacReady,
if a small particle of this thing is enough to take over an entire organism, then everyone should prepare their own meals, and I suggest we only eat out of cans.
From this moment on, we won't follow the germ chain, because everyone should be theoretically following Fuchs' suggestion. But this is over 3 days after the dog infiltrated their camp, and we'll go into the specific timeline later. If no one ate or drank from stuff they made alone, how easy would it have been for someone that is the thing to just spit on toothbrushes, lick forks and spoons, or anything like that? Bottom line is that everyone can be infected at this point, and there is no hope against this thing. For all we know, if they didn't do the blood test, everyone would have been turned into a thing in days regardless. Some theorists out there state that MacReady was always the thing since drinking from the bottle that Bennings had, and he is playing a game of chess with the lives at the base in order to be the last one standing. They say he cheats during the blood test and that he is infecting everyone by germs, like the Blair moment. However, if this was so, what about Childs? Childs puffed a joint that was in Palmer's mouth. Would he not be a thing too? Well, I'm sure people can say, well, MacReady switched his blood too. You can go on and on about the germ theory. The point I'm trying to make with all this is that the germ situation is just shockingly morbid and hopeless. There was no escape the moment that dog was licking Bennings and his hand went on that bottle, not to mention the many subtle germ moments that we see in the film after that event. And let's not forget all the little moments we didn't see, consisting of 3 days that were not on screen. The ironic thing about all this is that the germ stuff is just the background threat in this movie. I haven't even talked about the violent assimilation and manipulation this creature uses on its human targets. But we will go into that in our next video that will start with the next theory of who the shadow on the wall is. And with that said, I've been focusing on this movie so much I'm getting paranoid. So be nice to each other and be nice in chat, or we'll end up like Outpost 31.
Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired.
We'll see you next time. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps, and so does sharing. We're just happy you're here.